Hey guys, Coach Tim here with another episode of Managing the Madness. Today we are in Connally High School. We are here in the basketball gym with head coach John Howie. John, nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you, Tim.
How you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing
Awesome.
good. Glad to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a Saturday. I appreciate you coming up.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
knocking
sir.
us out for us. So, obviously, my wife Terry works at Connally.
Yes.
She kind of introduced us and got us on here together. She said
Okay.
a lot of good things to say about you over the past couple of years. So
Okay.
I'm happy to interview you. Give us a little bit of background on you.
Tim, I'm originally from North Carolina,
Okay.
and that's still my college team, dear to my heart.
I was gonna say, are you a Tar Heel?
I'm a Tar Heel.
All right.
I'm feeling Rodney Terry and the Longhorns really good right now,
Of course.
but my heart's still with Carolina.
Yep.
I grew up in a town called Wilmington, North Carolina. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I am.
Single parent household for most of my childhood,
Okay.
and my mom remarried a guy that was out in the oil field out in West Texas.
Got it.
So right before I started high school, we moved out to far West Texas, a place called Big Spring, Texas. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it.
I've heard of it. I've heard of it.
And from there, went to college down in San Marcos in Southwest Texas.
Okay.
I actually got my coaching and teaching start out in West Texas, a really small town nobody's probably ever heard of, Presidio, Texas.
Okay.
I ran into my old high school coach
Yeah.
at the Texas Association of Basketball Coaches convention, I think after my second year out there.
Wow.
And he brought me to Houston and got me on the staff there at Willow Ridge.
Okay.
He wasn't there very long. They
Yeah.
ended up making a change.
Yeah.
And then when I tell you, Tim, things just took off from there, man. I met the new head coach. We vibed really quick.
Yeah.
We had a lot of same philosophies and a similar background.
Yeah.
And we just took that program and it just took off from there.
That's fantastic. So growing up, how long were you in North Carolina? Like until you moved?
I was in North Carolina until I was middle school.
Okay.
We were there until my 8th or 9th grade year.
Gotcha.
And then we moved to West End. Talking about a culture shock.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Going from the coastal, Carolina,
Absolutely.
going to Wrightsville Beach on the
Yeah,
weekends, and all of a sudden I'm in Big Spring. And it's like oil fields and oil derricks,
no trees,
no
just
trees,
completely nothing. Yeah.
tumbleweeds,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
I grew up in Dallas with my mom and my stepdad, but my father was in Philadelphia originally, and then in Lawrence, South Carolina.
Okay.
So like I know kind of the East Coast a little bit in that way.
Yeah.
I used to fly into Charlotte, and then he'd pick me up and drive us into Greenville.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, but yeah, I can imagine like Central and West Texas comparatively to
man,
the trees and the beautiful forests of like the East Coast.
It was a pretty much of a culture shock.
Yeah,
But my dad was an AME minister.
Okay.
And so we traveled a lot. So I got to see a lot of parts of Texas people probably have never even heard of.
Yeah.
And we were every Sunday, man, we were getting in the car and we were going to some different little small town.
Yeah.
He was preaching a sermon. So
Yeah.
it was an interesting childhood.
Yeah.
It wasn't boring at all.
So did you always play basketball? Did you play any other sports?
It was just basketball.
Okay.
I dabbled a little bit in baseball.
Yeah.
I dabbled a little bit in football. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And I had a love and passion for the game of basketball, and so
Yeah.
that's kind of where I gravitated. The only problem was I wasn't really that good. I was an okay player, but I
Yeah.
just wasn't good enough to go and get a scholarship and those kind of things. So I had to find other avenues
Yeah.
to stay connected to the game. And I really, meeting Coach Courtney at Willow Ridge and going through that experience, coaching those guys,
Yeah.
it really kind of cemented that I can do this. I can be a part of a successful program.
Yep.
And lend what little expertise I did have, but I really took it as a learning experience.
Yeah.
I wanted to learn as much as I could
Yeah.
from all the greatness that was around me, because I was in a situation, when we got through at Willow Ridge, we ended up going to Texas Southern.
Okay.
And I got to coach Division I basketball,
Yeah.
for 6 or 7 years, and I got to meet some of the most incredible basketball minds in the country just from those experiences.
Yeah.
So I took it as a sponge. I'm trying to just learn as much as I can, and I think today that kind of helps in terms of my foundation of my knowledge base and things like that.
Yeah.
It's helped me become a better coach.
I find it's really interesting. Like a lot of some of the best coaches, especially at the youth levels, and maybe even in college, didn't have like the most outstanding playing careers,
Yeah.
right? And so it's
Yeah.
one of those things where you love the game so much, but you certainly become self-aware that my talent level doesn't necessarily match my work ethic and my dedication.
Right.
So like I'm not going to take myself very far here, but I still want to stay connected.
Yeah,
Absolutely. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I was probably a slightly above average high school player.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any offers coming out of high school and those kind of things. So I knew right off the bat, my family was real big on education. So I knew I had to go get my degree.
Yep.
And I really had always thought about education because my biological father was a math teacher.
Okay.
So it's kind of in my blood a little bit. And I'm real comfortable in the classroom, and I feel like the best coaches are always good teachers anyway.
I agree.
So those two things kind of went hand in hand for me.
I agree. What do you teach?
I teach, right now I'm teaching world history, American government, and economics.
Got it.
But I'm certified in special education. I'm certified in composite social studies, and I'm also certified in physical education.
Gotcha.
So, I find myself pretty marketable when it comes time to look for a job.
Yeah, no doubt.
I really don't have too much of a hard time getting people to look at me seriously. Yeah.
I did a little bit of background on the LinkedIn page you have.
Okay.
And it seemed like there was a lot of there's a lot of history of like different school districts and different college scenarios. So is that something that was easy to do as far as having a family and stuff like that? When did you guys like kind of figure out like that was the path it was going to be, like just kind of following the coaching career?
Well, for most of my experience, most of my time I was in Houston.
Okay.
I bounced around different places in Houston, different situations, different scenarios, and there was a situation that occurred at a school in Fort Bend where I thought I was up for a job that I didn't get.
Got it.
There was some emotional stuff going on, and I felt like, I just kind of needed a break from the Houston environment. So we went to Victoria.
Got it.
And there wasn't a lot of talent in Victoria, but there were a lot of good people in Victoria, a lot of good kids, a lot of good family support. So I started focusing not necessarily so much on, I had already won championships. I had been to the NCAA tournament. I had coached at a high level. Those kind of kids. Yeah. Those experiences in Victoria and in Elgin, they kind of made me focus more on the intangible stuff that goes with coaching.
Gotcha.
Helping kids to develop their character, making sure that we didn't just focus on the outcome, but we focused on the process. And trying to build programs even when there wasn't a lot of talent. Those experiences of going through some of those losing seasons and having teams that really fought hard, but they just didn't have the talent to win, and still being able to keep a positive mindset, helping the kids to grow and understand that this is a process. You're going to go on and do bigger and better things, building that team chemistry. I think those experiences really helped me become a successful first-year coach here at Connally, because I didn't just focus on the outcome. I always in the back of my mind was like, the process is always more important. How we do things. How we structure our practices, the expectations we have for the kids, all those things became the focal point of the program. And I knew with the talent, we'd win games.
I knew that would come. Exactly, that would come. Being from a single mother and single family unit household, is that something, the hard work ethic, do you think that's kind of born and bred into you as far as from the mom and from
I watched my mom, with 3 kids struggle, working full time, trying to hold down the household. A lot of the sacrifices that she made for us, I really wasn't aware of until I became older. And we started having those more adult conversations before she passed away. And it really kind of made me realize that, a lot of our kids are going through similar situations. And so as I get older, I get a little bit more seasoned. I'm a little bit more patient with kids who may not come as molded products right off the bat. And so I take a lot of pride in really trying to get to know my kids, build relationships, find out what's going on with their home life, and try to be a resource and an asset to them when they come to school.
Absolutely.
But those early experiences with my mom, like, we were really poor, Tim. I didn't know how bad it was until I got older. And I would look back at some of those photos and like, wow, we were really.
It was not an ideal scenario for sure, right? That's I find it interesting too how you're talking about taking the whole part of the athlete. I have a private training studio. We work with like youth athletes primarily, and especially when it comes to giving cues and giving information and giving feedback on things, trying to not just think about what I have to say to get this person to do it, but how they're going to interpret that information from me, what they're coming into the situation with, as far as are they what their background is, are they open to this, their level of learning or their level of understanding the information I'm giving them, having to be able to say the same thing but 10 different ways potentially to get information across them. I agree, I consider myself a bit of a teacher as well. I have certifications that I never actually end up using, but understanding the empathetic side of it and going, they're only going to be as good as me being able to understand where they're coming from first, and then how can I relay that information in that way.
It's funny you say that, because we do our beginning of the year teacher trainings and professional development. A lot of it lately, I'd say probably the last 5 years, it's really centered on trying to get to know kids and kind of dig a little bit and see what's going on with them, and because a lot of kids, and I tell kids this all the time, they're a product of the environment that they grew up in, and we can't separate them from their environment, we have to kind of try to empathize with them, try to get them to see, how that's having an impact on their ability to be successful in school. And so once kids understand that you care and they can trust you, I think you get a lot more done, not just on the basketball court, but even in the classroom.
I would agree completely. It's some of the early like business mentors and people that I worked for. Guy made a point one day in a staff meeting. He just basically said, people don't care what you know until they know what you care. Right? It's something that kind of transcends all types of like educational and coaching and cueing and learning environments. And so I've had people who work for me who that's the thing that I have to get across to them the most. I work with a lot of college kids who come in and work for me as interns or staff coaches, and their knowledge base is great, but they lack the ability, and that's what they're there for. And that internship process is to get the empathetic side of like, you know what you're talking about, but like, is that person ready to receive the information you're giving them? Are they capable of receiving it at the level you're trying to give it to them? Are you taking their thoughts, feelings, and what they're coming into consideration first? Right, absolutely.
The first kind of tier of my coaching philosophy deals with trust, and so we talk a lot about trust between the player trusting the coach trusting the players trusting each other. I think that's a huge thing. I think that's something that you have to constantly work on. I think kids nowadays want to see consistency. They want to see not necessarily that you're perfect, but if you make a promise, if you make a commitment, you're willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen. I think that's one of the things that really got us going. This year at this past season at Connally was, I think the kids have gotten a certain level of trust that, when I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be doing, coach is going to be in my corner. But when I'm doing those things that I know are not, part of what we expect of these kids in our program, then they know exactly what my reaction is going to be. And it's going to be consistent, whether it's the MVP of the district or it's the last guy on the bench who never plays. There are certain things where there's a standard, and we try really hard to live up to that standard every day. And there are days when we fail, we fall, but we recognize it, we acknowledge it, we vow to do better when we move on as a family. I coached youth soccer for quite some time, and consistency was the word. You use that word perfectly in that situation, because I had to be consistent. My message was consistent to the kids I worked with constantly. I looked for consistency from them. Hopefully with performance, right? Hopefully. That was not always the case, and that's okay. And understanding why was a big part of that, but they had to get the same attitude and type of response and type of cueing from me, because if I wasn't giving them consistency, it's impossible for me to expect it back from them. So that's a fantastic, that's a huge kind of like, I think that term and that concept is almost overlooked a little bit when it comes to coaching and sports in general. Is that we don't necessarily have to be great all the time, but there's got to be some type of consistency where I know what to expect from you and you know what to expect from me, and then that builds trust. Absolutely. Give you a good example. So I'm real big on being on time to practice. So we implemented a deal where if you're late to practice, doesn't matter the excuse. You have to do 10 towel pushes. If you're 1 minute late, 5 minutes late, whatever. So the kids were like, well, coach, my mom had a flat tire over there. I said, I understand, but it's still 10 towel pushes. And at first they thought I was being really mean and really harsh, but I said, guys, let's look at it this way. If I get into who deserves towel pushes because their reason is better than this guy's reason, now we start to play this game, and now it doesn't matter what the reason is. When you walk in that door late, you got 10 towel pushes.
Just go ahead and start it.
And by the end, I'd say probably midway through January, guys would come in and we don't even have to have a conversation. They know they're late, they just get it done and get it out the way, and it becomes a non-issue. The kids hold each other accountable, which for a coach, that's the that's the coup de grace.
Absolutely.
So that's just one example of that consistency. Whether it was the kid who was the first team all district, you walk in, 10 towel pushes. Some kid on the freshman B team, you walk in, 10 towel pushes. And so everybody sees that it's fair, and a lot of kids want to know that things are being done fairly. And I think as a coach, that's one of the biggest things. You can't play your better players in one set of rules and the other kids have a different set of rules. Doesn't mean I treat everybody exactly the same.
No, there's still nuance.
There's got to be a standard. For certain things, there has to be a standard.
Absolutely. That then becomes arbitrary, or it becomes favorites. It becomes a scenario where now you don't have the trust you're talking about because they're looking to you to provide that same consistent response, and then when you don't, because of whatever the reason is, and I think that's the smart way to do it, is to approach it from the jump, right? this is the case. I understand there's always going to be situations.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I'm going to hold the standard that you're going to be here. The standard is the standard. Mike Tomlin, Pittsburgh Steelers, right?
Yep,
like the standard is the standard.
Standard's the standard.
So ultimately, you know this is what's going to happen regardless. And they want that. The parents want that from you as a mentor, as a coach, as a guide. And then at the same time, they know that if they're getting that from you, then they can give you back the same type of level of consistency. That's absolutely awesome. That's awesome. Family, home life. Do you have I know you have kids? Harry's mentioned that.
Wife, 2 kids. Actually, my daughter Hannah just turned 16. I have a son, John. He wants me to call him John now instead of John. So we're changing that. He's going into the 6th grade.
Okay.
My wife and I have been married for about 24 years.
Awesome.
And we currently live in Elgin, so I commute here daily. And so now my daughter's on that ride with me every day, and she's like, "Dad, you make this drive every day?" I said, "Every day." But family life is good, man. It's been a blessing, to have a stable, loving, supportive environment to come home to every day. As an educator, sometimes things get crazy in the classroom. So being able to come home and have a family that's in your corner all the time is really cool.
That's right. I try to provide the same thing to my wife, in knowing that it can be one thing to the other, day to day. Do either one of them play sports?
My daughter's actually a varsity basketball player. She played varsity basketball actually since her freshman year at Elgin. We're hoping to get her in the program here at Connally. My son's not really an athlete. He's a gamer. He loves computers. He's a tinkerer. He likes to build stuff and all that. And it was funny because we actually tried the basketball thing one time. We went to a little AU event down in Buda, and he was playing with some kids that were bigger than him and older than him, and he got beat up really bad. And so we're on the ride home, and I'm looking in the rearview mirror, and he's got a little tear in his eye, and he's kind of trying to hold it in. I said, "John, what's wrong?" He goes, "Dad, I don't want you to be bad, but I really just don't think I'm going to be playing basketball." And I said, "Son, I just want you to do what makes you happy. Don't play because of me." My daughter, she's kind of the athletic one. She's the jock of the family. And my son's, he's on the computer.
He's doing his thing. Well, I think that speaks to probably most likely how you handle the home life with them, because I like talking to coaches about not just their experiences with their athletes, but like their own children. Because he had to be vulnerable enough. He had to trust you, back to that term, right? And that might even be the theme of this interview, right? Is the trust factor. He had to trust your response to be vulnerable enough to say, "I don't want to do this," right? I know you love this, and this is your career and your passion. But even at that age, in that young of an age, he has to understand that he's not going to get a negative response. He's going to get an empathetic response, whether he knows it or not, right? That you're not going to go off the handle or be disappointed or anything like that. So that speaks volumes, in my opinion, to like how you most likely handle that part of your life comparatively to the school part. That's huge. Do you coach your daughter? Like even individually at home or anything like that?
I give her pointers. We were going to the gym on Sundays and working out and doing stuff, and so I got to a point where, the dad in me was getting really frustrated because I knew what she was supposed to be doing and how she was supposed to be doing it, but she's looking at me as dad and not necessarily as coach, and I don't think I was getting as much out of her. So we actually ran into a really good friend of mine, a childhood friend of mine who works for the Williamson County juvenile detention. And he was one of kind of my mentors playing basketball, and we ran into each other through one of my assistant coaches. And I said, "Elroy, man, can you start coming and working with my daughter, because I feel like I've kind of reached a point where I'm not going to get much more out of her."
The message is starting to get cut off.
Starting to get muddled. So he started working with her, and we saw a lot of gains for those 2 summers that he was working with her. And when she found out that he and I kind of grew up in the same town, and our basketball experiences, we had a lot of similar experiences in basketball, she kind of gravitated towards him, and he's still a part of her process right now, trying to get her ready and keep her ready and ready to go. She's in volleyball right now, so she's loving volleyball, but she's kind of itching to get on the court and get the basketball thing started.
Absolutely. Is she a Heel fan?
She actually is not a Tar Heel fan. She is a UT fan.
Great program to follow anyway.
A couple of weeks ago, our principal, Mr. Garcia, he's big with Special Olympics in Texas. He actually had an event here on campus, and he got the UT women's basketball team and the UT men's basketball team to come and run like a day camp for all the Special Olympics kids. So I brought my daughter up, and she got to meet Harmon, the point guard, and so we got a picture, and she was all cheesing, and she's like, "Oh my God, Dad, she's my hero, she's my hero." And the funny part, she goes, "Dad, she's not she's not bigger than me. We're the same size.
Yeah, absolutely.
I said, so Hannah, it's not about how big you are, it's how hard you work and getting your skill set ready.
Yep.
So I think that was kind of a watershed moment because she's looking at her on TV and going, oh my gosh, she must be 10 feet tall. She's this great college basketball star and all that. And then they get side by side. They're almost
like
the exact same size.
Sideways on,
So she was like, wow. I said, so Hannah, as far as working and your skill set and putting in the time, if you want to get to that level, this is what it's going to take.
Yeah, it's a fantastic thing to have her meet a hero that early on at this developmental stage where she can go, that's just someone just like anybody else.
Yep.
Like, it's with TV and with everything else social, seeing them on these platforms and seeing them on TV, you just don't know they're human until they actually walk in the door.
They walk in the door.
And you're like, oh, okay.
And those guys, they were so great when they were here working with the kids and just being so gracious and it was a really, really, really cool experience. So
that's fantastic. Yeah. So let's jump back real quick to, I'd love to get your impressions and your thoughts on AAU. I'm not a basketball coach guy. I follow a gentleman named Lee Taft, who's a speed and agility and a basketball kind of specialist, who's pretty outspoken on the positives and most likely the negatives of AAU basketball. So I've always liked to get someone who's in it and obviously has more of a take on it, because it seems, as a club soccer guy and the pay-for-play model and stuff like that, I have some firsthand knowledge there. But hearing about AAU basketball, it's always interesting to me to have that conversation.
Well, my perspective, I think, is probably a little bit more informed than most people. So working as a Division I, coach for those years, I had to build a certain relationship with all those AAU coaches. I've also helped run an AAU program. I've been intimately involved with several programs down in the Houston area. And as a high school coach, you have kids who go play in those events and those tournaments. So my thing is, I think there are a lot of guys out there doing it for the right reasons. They're doing good work with kids. They're helping kids develop. They're giving kids opportunities. They're promoting kids. They're giving a lot of kids who come from limited means, an opportunity to travel the country, play in front of college scouts. Really, take the game to a new level for them personally. Unfortunately, there are a lot of guys out there who are not doing it for the right reasons, and there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of public relations and PR stuff that's going on where guys are taking credit for the development of players who were really good before they got their hands on finished products.
Exactly.
So there's a lot, and I tell parents all the time, you've got to be really careful navigating that space.
It seems like it.
And the one resource I think that parents underutilize are high school coaches. We have relationships with those guys. We know a lot of these guys. We've worked with them. And so I always encourage parents to talk to your high school coaches and get into the reputation of this person and talk to former players and just kind of be aware that, there are a lot of promises made. There's a lot of hype and a lot of, energy around, certain programs, but you have to understand what is it that my child really needs from a program. And you have to go in knowing what you're trying to get out of it. And don't be too trusting. Verify when things are being told to you. Be very careful about the financial aspect of it. If you're looking at trying to get your kid recruited, make sure that the program you're associating with is actually going and playing in live events where coaches are going to be around.
Where actually can be seen.
It can be seen. A lot of guys assume parents don't know the recruiting calendar. And so they're scheduling events and college coaches can't even be in attendance. So there's a lot that goes into it. I try to, tell parents you have to educate yourself.
Absolutely.
You have to educate yourself. You can't just, let your child go and be with someone who there's really not a lot of accountability. There aren't any real repercussions when things don't go right. There's not a lot of monitoring, and there's not. It's kind of a wide open.
I literally call it the Wild Wild West. I have a good friend of mine whose daughter's going into, I think she's going into 7th or 8th, and she'll end up at Rouse. And he's coming to me as this youth sports strength training kind of resource about basketball. And sadly, I have clients who had kids who played AAU and who played basketball here, so I'm trying to connect that parent to that parent. I know soccer really well with how the system itself works, but I could never really put my finger on this is the governing body and this is how the structure is, and these are all the same type of level of organizations and they're connected here. It seems really people can start clubs, programs without any kind of
probably
due diligence or anything else.
Just within the Austin area, there are probably multiple 100 teams.
Yeah,
they're all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, just if I'm putting myself in the shoes of the parent, how do I make a decision?
Correct.
Who do I trust?
Yeah.
And what's in the best interest of my child. So it's a tough situation. Like I said, there's a lot of good guys doing it for the right reasons.
That's the thing. You want to find the ones that you sync with the best, that actually are in it for the right reasons, right?
And I always like to try to establish, like, I want to know who my guys are playing for in the off season and try to establish those connections and relationships. So hopefully we can reinforce some of the same values and same principles, because for me, the ultimate goal is to help these young men grow, and mature and hopefully move into a direction that's going to help them achieve some success and achieve their goals for life.
Absolutely, let's shift gears to last year. Let's talk a little bit. I want to get into that a lot, because first year, right? Kind of take me through, and without any kind of bashing or negativity. What did you find the program at? Where first day walking into it, kind of, how did you find the program? Because making the run you guys made was huge. And Terry was with it, like, step by step, right? Obviously, was in the office together, and then talking about it all the time, keeping track of games and stuff like that. So how did this last year kind of unfold out for you guys?
Well, I walked into a situation, honestly, Tim, where there was a lot of talent already here on campus.
Gotcha.
There were kids here who could play, who had been playing together, through middle school and through their AU experiences at 12U and 13U and 14U. So those kids had a certain chemistry that was already here. What they didn't have was a lot of discipline.
Got it.
The structure, the discipline was really not there. They had relied on talent a lot, and so there wasn't this consistent kind of, pool of habits, successful type habits. So I had to come in and kind of put some structure in place, and knowing in the back of my mind, if I can get them to be more disciplined on defense, if I can get them to trust the process in terms of skill development and working hard in practice and focusing on being a great defensive team. Those things that really didn't have a whole lot to do with their offensive capability. Just getting them to see that the defensive part is just as important. And if we can take all this natural athletic ability and skill and use that to help us become the best defensive team, then that's going to translate to a really incredible season. It wasn't always easy in the beginning. They weren't used to coming up on Saturdays. We implemented a workout on Saturday where we come in and lift weights on Saturdays, film working and shooting. They weren't used to that, so they resisted that early on. They were not all the time happy with my approach in terms of, what are you doing in the hallways? How do you conduct yourself in the classroom? So that was always a big deal. So, I kind of laid a foundation. And I said, look, I hope that you guys are willing to buy into what I'm telling you, because if you are, we can have an incredible year. So I'm having this speech like in September and October before the season even starts. And then they saw the consistency.
That's the
they saw the consistency.
How I find a lot of times when I talk with, and I get a lot of high school athletes who are, going to college to play their sports. They're coming in to do work with me to kind of fit that last little physical piece of training. And they're very intelligent, they're very high level performers, but a lot of times, whether it be their club scenarios or whether it be their high school scenarios, I find that I'm only getting one side of the conversation, but sometimes I feel like their coaches aren't as transparent with them as I think they could be, right? And how much does the coach trust that I can give this information to this player, this team, and let them help themselves? So the question is, like, how transparent with that were you with them? Hey, you guys, talent, I'm not worried about. I'm worried about your organization.
It was an open, transparent process, and and it was kind of like rolling the dice. Either these guys are going to like completely be turned off by what I'm about to tell them, or at some point, they're going to understand. Okay, maybe he understands. What it takes to play at that level. He's coached some kids that they know by name, and so I was really hoping and praying and banking that the message would not be thwarted, because it's something that they haven't heard before. So it was we had pretty frank conversations about if you're not going to class on time, if you're not applying yourself in the classroom, if you're not building relationships with teachers that are positive and sound, all your work on the court could be for nothing.
Correct.
If you're not putting in the work and holding each other accountable as teammates, all this hype and stuff around us as a team is never going to materialize. We're just going to be so-so. And I said, you guys are too talented to just be an okay team. I'm striving for greatness.
Yep.
And so this is what greatness looks like.
Yep.
You know, and so, you know, some kids bought in quicker than others.
Sure.
I was really lucky. I had a group of seniors that were hungry for that. You know, they had been at Connally for 4 years,
maybe, you know?
and they could see the difference that I was trying to build.
Yeah.
And so I think more than anything else, that group of seniors was really responsible, you know, for helping me to put the foundation for this program in place in such a quick, you know, at such a quick pace.
Yeah.
Those kids came to practice every day. They worked hard. They didn't question, you know, my decision making. They tried to hold their other teammates accountable.
Yeah.
Our most talented players were some of our younger players.
Gotcha.
So the maturity level wasn't there. So as a coach, I was very appreciative of those seniors who were willing to come in and take that leadership role.
Absolutely.
And hold those guys accountable and give them kind of the model and example of this is what coach is asking us to do. So let's all get on board.
Yeah.
It was incredible to watch the team. As you know, we had a slow start in November. But I think as they gradually began to understand and began to see, I was going to be consistent. I was going to enforce certain defensive rules. But at the same time, I'm allowing you freedom on offense. I'm allowing you to play the style of ball that you like to play. The trade-off now is you got to play my style of defense. And you've got to really commit to being the best defensive team every single night. Whether or not shots are falling, we may not be able to control that, but we can control how well we guard and how well we defend.
Absolutely.
I think that was the biggest, I guess, the senior buy-in, and then, you know, coupled with that young talent, and then as the team began to buy in, you know, we go on this 17, 18 game win streak.
Terry would tell me about it. It was
incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's interesting you mentioned the seniors too, because I find in some of the coaching education I've done over the years, you have, the way I look at it in our house, and not in our house, but in my gym, is ultimately you have motivation, you have skill, right? And you have lows and highs for both categories, right? And so when I find, and I used to run big group classes, and so you'd have these various levels of people and various interests in being in the room, you'd have like a highly skilled, highly motivated person. I tend to just delegate things to. I don't need, even in a soccer context when I was coaching, I don't need to be heavy-handed with that person. I might need to inspire the highly skilled, low motivated kid. Right. So it's about not just like in that situation recognizing these guys are guys I can just delegate something to. Hey, you're leading warm up tonight, and I want to make sure that like these two things have to happen. Right. Whereas with these guys, maybe you're in their ear a bit more because you recognize that they're not quite there yet from a leadership standpoint. So it's really speaking individually to players and understanding how to get the best out of each one. Right.
That's the key to coaching. Like I can't, like certain kids, I can jump on real loud and public and all, and they'll respond. Certain kids, I have to pull them to the side, put my arm around and whisper a little something in their ear. Certain kids, you know, like I say, when you talk about delegating, we had a senior point guard last year who was National Honor Society, president of the senior class. I mean, he had a 4-point-something GPA. I mean, he was a coach's model student athlete, and highly motivated. Had been playing varsity since his freshman year. And he was really, really, really hungry to have a good senior experience and a good senior season. And it didn't take more than a couple of weeks for him to recognize that what I was bringing to the program was something that was going to help us all be really successful. So I could leave practice, in the middle of their warm-ups and their stretch routines, and he would hold those kids accountable and make sure everybody was doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it was just a really, really powerful deal to have a group of seniors that were that motivated and who were pretty good basketball players too. And were really motivated to want to, go out on top and have a great year. They had made the playoffs the year before, but I think they got beat in the first round. They're in the bi-district round. They one of their better players that was academically ineligible for certain parts during the year, so they slipped down to that fourth spot. And so, there were a lot of things that were going on. So my plan was to really drive home the academics, drive home the character development, and then drive home this concept that we can be the best defensive team, in the area.
Those are all the intangible stuff you're talking about, like in the hallways, in the classroom, stuff like that. I've had occasions in my career where I was able to visit professional soccer setups and stuff like that, and there was a list on the locker room in this one club that I visited, and it was basically like, are you ensuring that you're ready to be selected for play? Like, what are you doing outside of the complex, right? This is a multi-million-dollar complex with multi-million-dollar players. and the list on the locker room was like, are you hydrated? Are you getting your sleep? Like, all these things that you're fully in control of. Because once you step out on the court or the field, like there's an element of uncontrollability. Like you can't control, especially if the shots aren't going down, right? Like you can't control that. But everything else, if all those other things are intangibly done well, then you're going to more than likely be successful. Are you available for selection was the title of that board. Like, and if you're not, then it's no one else's fault. Right. Ultimately, like that's not something that we can control for you. And getting that message through them by saying, like, if you can't be on the court because you failed, then what are we going to do?
What are we going to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
John Gordon has a graphic. It says control the controllables. And it's a circle, and all the things inside the circle are things you can control. Your attitude, your work ethic, your behavior, your actions, your words, whatever. Stuff outside the circle, other people's actions, and I tell them all the time, you cannot worry about things that you have no control over.
Correct.
We spend way too much of our mental energy worrying about things, what other people are saying, what other people are doing, and we need to spend most of that focus on what is it that I have complete control over. You know, do I have control over whether or not I get up and get out of bed? Yes, you do. Do I have control over making sure my grades are straight? That's all under your control. So those are the things that we need to focus on. And for young people, a lot of times they never really thought about it like that, and so they get it kind of skewed, where their energy is going to things that they have no control over, where that energy could be better spent taking care of those things they can control.
And even on the court, on the field, like something happens, it's not necessarily about that, it's how you react to that situation. And are you going to be able to come back from that in a better situation, or are you going to allow that situation to define you and react because of it? Right? Like, that can't be the situation.
One of our early season losses. We played Waco Connally. And they came in here and they beat us, I think, by 1 point, 2 points. It was a really close game. And ironically, at the end of the game, we played horrible. I was so frustrated the whole game. I was just like, I had that look on my face. And so at the end of the game, I think we're down one. One of our best players gets the ball inbound. He throws up a shot from half court, and it goes in. But it was either at the buzzer, slightly after the buzzer, whatever. And the crowd, everybody's going crazy. Coach, you're not gonna go crazy. And I'm sitting there like, you know what? At this point, I don't even care. You guys played for 31 and 59 seconds like crap. And you want me to go crazy about, the ref not counting the basket from half court so y'all can win a game.
This miracle shot. Right?
I'm upset about all the defensive rotations we missed. I'm upset about all the offensive rebounds you gave up that allowed them to get the lead in the first place. I'm upset about all the turnovers.
We shouldn't have been in that situation.
We shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. So coach, you're not going to say anything to the ref? No, I don't care.
No, and plus, what can I say at this point to call that back?
He's not going to change it. No. So, I'm focusing on the things that we could have done throughout the entire game that would have made that whole end of the game scenario completely unnecessary. And at that point, they all thought I was totally crazy.
Oh,
well, coach doesn't care about winning. So we had to have a conversation in the back. I said, if you think that my not arguing a call at the end of the game means I don't care about winning, that we got a lot of work to do. I said, here's what I care about. And so I went through and laid out, the same defensive principles we talked about on day one, and we went in film session. I'm pointing out all the little details. So if we do all this stuff at a higher level, guess what? We're up 10 points, 12 points at the end of the game, and that easy. We take the referees out of the game. And so I think that was kind of a turning point for the program, because they were like, okay, this guy's crazy. He's not really worried about winning and losing right now. He's trying to make us play at a certain level. And it was a non-district game. It wasn't gonna, didn't mean anything, but they were so focused on the outcome.
Correct.
And they didn't understand that we had started losing that game like in the second quarter. Because we weren't doing the things that we needed to do.
The process wasn't right to start with, right?
Every offensive rebound, I'm over there just like, I'm living, just losing it. I'm calling timeout. I'm like, what are we, we're not blocking. And Connally, Waco Connally, to their credit, they were a big team, athletic team. Most of those guys were football players. They didn't make one 3-point shot all night. They lived in the paint. And because we weren't willing to go down there and block out and rebound and do the little things consistently, we find ourselves in a situation now we're hoping some referee, counts a basket.
You're
from
playing
half
their
court.
game now, not your game, right? It's and the thing is, you respond like that. If you respond like that at the end, that is now inconsistent
Yep.
with everything
Yeah.
you've shown leading
Yeah.
up to that point.
Yeah.
And from an attitude, personality standpoint, like
Yep.
that's again,
Yeah.
and that derails because now we feel victimized
Yeah.
that we didn't get that call,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it just sends you down a hole of the wrong type of behaviors
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
now going to come from this. That now
Yeah.
we deserve something, even though we didn't do
We-
anything
yeah.
to do it,
Yeah.
to get it right.
Yeah.
And it just you have to then pull them back out of that situation. Right?
So that was kind of the back and forth
Yeah.
throughout November and early part of December. There were games we would win, and I'd be really upset
yeah.
because I didn't like the way we played. There would be games that we would lose. Like we played the number one team in Class 4A, Dallas Carter. We played
Yeah.
them in a championship game down in San Antonio, the tournament.
Yeah.
And we were without our best player. We're going in. They had a 6'10" kid in the post, and they got a Division I guard at point guard at about 6'4". I mean, they're huge. They're athletic.
Yeah.
Coach Love does a great job with those guys. So I knew we were kind of, it's kind of we're up against a really tough opponent.
Yeah.
But we battled.
Yeah.
And we battled. And I've got my little 5'9" guard down there blocking out a 6'10" kid, and they're scrapping and they're going for it.
Yeah.
And we end up losing the game by 9-10 points maybe. And Coach Love comes up and says, Coach, he goes, I don't know what you told those guys, but Coach, y'all have been our toughest test so far this season. Those guys battled. Yeah. And so they're in the locker room, they're all upset because they lost the game. And I'm walking, and I'm like, man, I can't believe we battled them dudes like that. And they're like looking like, Coach has lost it. Yep. And I went through and the same, list of things.
Yep.
We were blocking out like we're supposed to. We're fronting the low post like we're supposed to. We took care of the basketball.
Yep.
We executed our offense. And the fact that we lost the game, I don't care.
It's
irrelevant. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything because now we're playing at a level where when we get to, Bastrop, Cedar Creek, and we get to Pflugerville High School, we get to Hendrickson, and we're doing those things, we're going to be fine. And so it was a process of getting them to see it.
That's awesome.
And I couldn't just focus on outcomes.
No.
Because, you win some, you lose some. But how we play and our consistent effort and executing the things on defense, that's what I knew those were going to be the things that were going to, pay dividends when it really mattered once we got into league play.
Yeah. What was the general feeling after the season was over from them? Like, were they happy with themselves? Were they? I mean, because again, we're talking about the outcome and the process, and clearly the process worked. Yeah. And it took some time and some fight to get to that point. But what was the overall kind of like decompress? It's over. What do we feel like? Right?
I think once the initial, let down of losing that playoff game to Brian Ritter. I think once the emotion of that kind of waned, I brought each kid in at the end of before we left for spring break, brought them in, had individual meetings with each kid. I gave them kind of a rundown on these are the things that I thought you did well this year. These are the things I want you to get better at in your off season. Kind of give them a blueprint going forward. Talk to them about their role for next year. We had a really positive end to the school year because I think everybody realized, wow, man, if we did that in year one, what's going to happen around here in year two and year three and year four. So again, after the initial letdown, obviously, you don't want to lose your last game of the season, but there was some time to process that. But we came back, man, and we worked hard. We got in the off season, got in the weight room, started doing some things. And I think everybody's pretty optimistic about what's coming. And with the realization now that, now that you've shown that you are a good program, you're a good team, you're going to get a better effort than normally.
Yeah, people are bringing more. Now there are targets there.
Target on your back now.
There.
And so our theme now is let's don't be satisfied. Let's work even harder to take it a step further, than we did last year. And we all, now that we understand the expectations, I think those are pretty clear. We know what we're capable of. I think that's pretty clear. Now the only question is, can we commit to that process of taking this thing even one step further? That
you hear about that a lot with either championship teams or teams that have good runs like that where can we do this again now? And you lose some seniors, obviously. Can you replace that with some underclassmen who kind of bought in early and kind of got on the train quick? And how do you then remotivate a group of people to do even better the next time around, right? And that's always an interesting conversation. Like, what do you have to say? Because you want to win it. Obviously, you don't. But what happens next? And
I think that as a coach, one of my biggest responsibilities is not allowing them to kind of rest on their laurels and get comfortable. Like, okay, we won district last year, so we're good. No. We're not playing that game. So I'm just as adamant about what you're doing in the hall. I'm just as adamant about your grades. I'm just as focused on the process now because like I tell them, every kid from 8th grade all the way through NBA superstars, everybody's got to get better.
Yeah.
And if you're not committed to getting better, then at some point you're going to flatline, and that kid that you were head and shoulders above, he's going to pass you up, and opportunities that should have presented themselves to you, those opportunities are going to start to diminish. So as a coach, my responsibility is to keep them grounded, keep them focused, keep them humble, make sure they understand this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
The window doesn't stay wide open forever.
Correct.
Every season the window gets shorter and shorter. Now, as a senior, now you've got that short window.
Yeah.
So let's don't waste time. Let's don't waste opportunity. Let's maximize every single day, every single minute we're in the gym. And if we do that, then I'm confident that we'll be as good or better than we were last season.
You've shown me now that you can do this.
Yeah.
Right. So now it's almost like this again. You've now created a new standard.
Yep.
This is now what we did last year, and the buy-in, the attitude, the effort, the consistency and trust you showed me last year.
Yeah.
That's now, that's standard.
Yeah.
And we got to build on top of that.
Got to build on it.
Yeah. So, and I guess in parting and kind of wrapping it up, like and we'll speak a little bit to the parenting part of this, right? Mm-hmm. So, and we haven't really done that yet. So let's kind of wrap with that and get your take on your interactions with parents, right? Like, speak to that process over the course of this past year. As a club kind of private soccer coach, when I was doing that, parents are right there on the sidelines. They're bringing their kids to practices. I had a lot of interaction. Right. And so from the consistency part of the conversation, parents expected me to be consistent. I expected the kids to be consistent, and then we all expected referees and things like that to be consistent as possible, right? So with this setting, how much do you interact with parents?
Well, we do a meeting with our parents before the start of the season, so that'll happen in October, maybe a week or so before we actually start official practice. And I try to have a message with parents that I have a responsibility and a set of duties as a coach. I'm a dad, so I know there's a certain responsibility and a set of duties as a parent. If we both do our jobs at a high level, we're going to have a student athlete that's prepared to be great, that's prepared to come in and perform at a high level. I'm going to try really hard not to step on your toes as a parent, and I want to appreciate that you try really hard not to step on my toes as a coach. So let's stay in our lane, respect each other's lane,
position,
and not get things muddled up, because I think when you start having situations where parents try to coach and coaches try to parent, toes get stepped on, people's feelings get hurt. There's a lot of miscommunication. So let's try to avoid that. We want the parents to be involved. Obviously, we want you to be here to support your kid. We want you to be here to support the program and the team. But there's a standard of expectations for how parents need to behave. And so I had that frank, open, honest conversation during that meeting. Now, in my situation here, it was a little dicey at first, because I'm coming from a program at Elgin where we didn't win a lot of games. And so automatically the parents are looking, well, this guy hadn't won anything, so what does he know? So there was that buy-in, that process. I would say by, early January, mid-January, the parents were 90%, on board, ready to go, trusting what I was doing. But I had to build that through November and December, making sure that the kids were, being taken care of when they're on the road, making sure the kids had the right equipment, making sure the parents were being communicated about, practice times and whenever there were changes. So being very professional, very organized, making sure they could look at the program and say, okay, and not be in a position where the parents were going to question, not the X's and O's.
No.
But, coaches making these crazy decisions and making these arbitrary decisions, so that we had to build that trust. As we got deeper into the season, I think they began, just like the players, to see the consistency. The standard was not going to change whether we won a game or lost a game.
Correct.
So I had a rule where I don't do parent interactions before, especially during and after a game. And we had a couple of incidents where we had some parents who came, who approached me right after we're in line shaking hands after the game, and I've got a parent like right here, wanting to vent. And I asked the principal at the time, Miss Gamble, said, Miss Gamble, I've got an idea, and I want to see if I can get your support on it. So she said, well, Coach, you do what you need to do, and if it's something that I think is we'll have a discussion. So we opened up one half of the bleachers. I kept that side closed.
Yeah.
I put everybody over there on that side. I put my varsity and sub-varsity kids right behind the team that was playing a set of chairs.
Yep.
And so we closed down this side of the gym, and I put everybody on that side.
Yep.
And so I had one or two parents ask me, by email, well, Coach, why is the gym, I said, well, we've had a lot of incidents with parents trying to approach me after a game. So I want to remove that.
Correct.
That access.
You don't even get the chance to have that situation.
We don't need that access anymore because it's dangerous for me.
Absolutely.
I don't want to pop off and say something crazy in the heat of the
moment. Like we had the club I worked for. It was a 24-hour rule.
Okay.
Right. You could not. Game was on a Sunday. It was against club. Right. Game's on a Sunday at 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
No conversation with me about this until at least the next day.
Yeah.
Like 24 hours basically pre and post, so that I get to settle down.
Right.
I get to take stock.
Right.
You get to go home and decompress, have dinner with your family, XYZ, whatever it might be, right? And just now we can come back to each other 24 hours later, right? And the things that I would say, we would have the same situation. We would have a preseason meeting, like first week or two of the season. We'd usually have one mid-season from progress report standpoint, and we'd have one at the end where we'd have player evaluations.
Yeah.
The first thing I always said was, all due respect, I'm the only objective party in this conversation right now.
Yeah.
As much as you might know about soccer, you might even be smarter than me and more talented physically than I am. You might have played at a higher level. All respect to that.
Yeah.
But I don't have a child in this situation.
Yeah.
And all of you do.
Yeah.
None of you can say that you value the group more than the individual that you have as a child.
Yeah.
I can say that.
Yeah.
So therefore, my opinion is ultimately going to be the one that we go with.
Yeah.
Because as a parent, you are automatically unenrolled in that process of being objective.
You cannot be objective because it's
fine.
And it's funny you say that because I tell them that in the meeting. I said, look, I understand that you want what's best for your baby.
Sure.
I get that.
Yep.
But so does that parent.
Correct.
And so does that parent. So does that parent. So
it's up to me to manage that.
As a coach, I have to manage all these kids and all these personalities and all these situations. And I do it from a standpoint of I'm not going to make a decision that's going to be beneficial for one kid at the expense of everybody else.
Yep.
I'll never do that.
Yeah.
And once you open that dialogue, the parents who are going to be open to that and be positive and accepting of that message are going to be fine. But it doesn't matter. With certain parents, it doesn't matter what you say.
No, it's true.
They're going to be toxic no matter what because their sole focus is, my child's not getting up enough shots, or my child should be starting and playing this kind of minutes and things like that. And so a lot of that, I won't say I ignore it, but I don't. I kind of let it bounce off.
You
because
can't live on that. No,
I can't let that penetrate.
Nope.
What we're trying to do. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So as most of the people who are going to be watching this and listening to this are going to be parents, give me kind of as the final say, what's your kind of like take home message for a parent of a youth athlete that's either on your team or like in general just kind of wanting to help their kid be happy, successful as a student athlete?
Yeah, let them be kids.
Yeah.
Let them be kids. Don't make them into professional athletes at age 16.
Yeah.
Give them a chance to just kind of, I always tell kids at the end of the school year, man, go on vacation with your parents.
Yeah.
If that means you got to miss an AU tournament, so be it.
Yeah.
Don't get them to the point where they don't want to come to the gym because it starts to turn into a grind and it's not fun anymore. And they're not really getting a whole lot out of it. Let them be kids. Love them through everything. And as a dad, my daughter, she's been through some things, and I've had to love her through a lot of stuff that she felt like was going to ruin our relationship. But that relationship that you have with your child is going to last way beyond their playing career and their playing experience. So don't let the game ruin the relationship you have with your kid. Make sure you understand who you can trust in terms of coaches and teachers and school administrators, whoever. Build those relationships up. But the biggest thing is let them be kids. Let them have fun and be goofy sometimes, and let them take a Saturday and just do whatever. Because the school experience is such a short time. In 2 years, these kids who are class of 25, they're going to be off doing whatever. And if they're blessed and fortunate enough to go play at the college level, it's going to be enough of a grind. And then if they if one or two kids get a chance to go play overseas or go play in Europe, that's going to be a professional then.
Yep.
Don't make it a professional job right now. You
exactly.
know, let them be kids. Let them have fun.
That's awesome. John, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Man.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you so
Tim,
much
nice
for
to
coming
meet you,
out.
man. Thank
Very
you so
nice
much.
meeting
I
you.
appreciate this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.